Are you tangled in JSON while working with Terraform on the Azure? Microsoft got you. Microsoft just announced an AzAPI provider update, which is related to dynamic properties. Before we dive in, let's explore what AzAPI provider is. AzAPI provider is basically the recommended Terraform provider for Azure, which is for the latest and the greatest functionality. As you guys know, it's been almost 2 years since the Microsoft announced AzAPI provider, and it has 20 million plus downloads already. And Microsoft is basically doing updates on the Azure and Terraform side, which has better speed and functionality if we compare AzAPI with the Azure RM provider. With this update, let's see what the dynamic properties are. Simply put, dynamic properties enable the Azure API provider to take a block of HCL instead of requiring JSON, which meaning before we used to have JSON encode Terraform function to encode the JSON properties in a resource code block. With this provider update, we can get rid of that JSON encode and basically dynamically just use the properties attribute in the resource code block. But this is not it. Let's continue down with the other updates. And with this update, we basically can get the outputs of the resources without using JSON encode function in Terraform. Before this update, we had to have JSON encode function in front of the resource that we want to gather the output from. Right now, with the update, you can see from this code block, there is no need for the JSON encode function. The other good functionality that we gained with this update is managing secrets with dynamic properties. Before this update, when we used to have some sort of sensitive value in a JSON encode function, such as properties of some such of resource, we can see that in the output, these property values, attributes are basically hidden because of the JSON encode function. But with the new update, with the dynamic blocks, we can see that we don't use the JSON encode function in the resource code block, and the output is different. We can see the actual property attributes in the output of the plan here, right? Before we couldn't see this because of the JSON encode function. Right now, with the update, we can see all of this. Even though there are sensitive ones, we can see it has sensitive value. And the last feature we gained is dynamic blocks with HCL functions. What we mean by that is basically before the dynamic properties, none of the native functionality that was available with HCL language could be utilized with the JSON blocks of the AzAPI provider. What we mean by that is we can use for each loops or lifecycle.ignore changes with the new dynamic blocks without using JSON encode functions, right? So here we have local variables which has subnet values in it, as well as we have our virtual network resource code block here, and we wanna give some values for our virtual network in a JSON format without using JSON encode function, right? So as you guys can see here, we don't have JSON encode function. Instead, we are using dynamic blocks, which came with the new update, and we can still utilize the for each loops in the resource code block. And the other example is basically the lifecycle ignore changes. We can utilize the body of the resource, whatever resource you are using, without using the JSON encode code block, and utilize the lifecycle changes from the body of there. So everything is easier now. So if you want to upgrade your AzAPI provider version to version 1.13, please do Terraform init upgrade. But there's a note here. Microsoft is not recommending to using version 1.13.0 as the release came with some breaking changes, right? Please move your version to version 1.13.1 of the AzAPI provider. If you have any questions, please comment below. Please like and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.